You know, we can probably. Yeah.
There you go. Wherever you are tonight.
Right? Wasn't born, sadly.
Good morning. Just as I introduced myself a minute ago, I'm Alan Storm. I'm Superintendent of Human Hygiene, and I would like to start with Mr. Baker and have everybody introduce themselves. Again.
Oh, Calvin Baker, Superintendent, Middle School District.
Angel Canto, Assistant Superintendent, Nogales Unified.
David Baker, no relation, but I wish I did because he's so successful. Floydville School District.
H.T. Sanchez, Superintendent, Tucson Unified School District.
Okay, so we have 4 questions to go through here, and I'm going to actually start with Mr. Baker and ask, and then we'll go this way, and then we'll sort of go back and forth. So the very first question is, what have been the biggest challenges in creating a college-going culture on your campuses?
Oh, I mean, everybody, I didn't see the question, so I'm coming at this cold. I think it's always hard for any of us, whether you're young or old, to live into the future, and so we we're constantly struggling to help focus our vision on the horizon and not on today, and we're constantly struggling with students to help them see that what they do today is going to have a very significant impact on and they should be planning for their life after high school, and not just what's happening tomorrow or this weekend. You know, we all struggle with that. So I'll stop there. Maybe be better prepared for the next question.
I would echo many of the things that Mr. Baker has already indicated, that I think just building awareness with our parents and our students, and even learning how to assist our parents and our students more effective as faculty. A lot of our students are first or second generation college bound, and so just helping them to establish those academic goals, beginning at the middle level, not waiting until high school when frankly it's a little bit too late, but to support them and their families. That's what's so exciting about the Helios project, is to be able to bring those resources in. Now that we've been able to implement the ACT with all of our juniors, and to follow up this fall with our seniors is going to be exciting, as we're able to support them and their parents in the college application and FOSFA processes, which can be kind of intimidating if your family hasn't been through that process before.
So in thinking about challenges, one of the connection points between students who are going to pursue sort of post-secondary and college-going cultures, we have to bring the parent into the loop if they haven't been part of it. And we have found that some of the challenges associated with bringing the parent in to understand some of the mechanics that many of you might just take for granted, filling out a FAFSA form or a college application form, or understanding what it means to secure a teacher letter of recommendation or support in order to access sort of the 4-year institutional post-secondary, has been a particular challenge for us, because we're managing quite a bit of information that just doesn't kind of come naturally. And those of us who have been through it once, I actually think that you learn a whole set of skills associated with helping your kids, because you've kind of said, I've dealt with that before, I know this sort of happens, no doesn't always mean no. And how do you work through that? And then the whole financial picture associated with that has been one of the challenges that we've been really focusing on in our school recently, helping families manage something like, accessing and uploading tax statements. And some of you might say, well, why are you in that? Because that's part of that process. And so when I look at challenges, I look at how do we really bring together the parent, the student, and the school in a support system, and the university system or the post-secondary system as well. And Pima and University of Arizona, Pima Community College and the University of Arizona have been very good and much more kind of open and accessible, I would say, in the last 5 or 6 years. You can see it happening. It's exciting.
I'd have to say the biggest challenge is college debt for students, and that scares the heck of a lot of students away. I remember when I got married, my wife didn't bring a dowry of 5 chickens and some goats. Instead, she brought about $60,000 of college loans that took the first 10 years of our marriage to pay off. And that's a reality. And course, that was a long time ago, so I can't imagine what that debt would be today. So you have a lot of families that are looking at college, and you sign up, and by the time you pay for your books, your room and board, your classes, your fees, you have to take out a loan. And a lot of families look at the amount you have to take out if you don't qualify for financial aid, or if your paperwork doesn't make it through in time, or if a form doesn't get filed. And if a family goes out and takes out a loan, you could buy a car with the amount of money that it takes to get into college. That scares a lot of families away, a lot of first-generation families. I think the other challenge that we face is when we say a college-going culture, people think four-year university. And I was visiting with a small auto shop owner, and she was telling me that their lead tech makes $90,000, and what they need is a industry ASE certification that you can get through Pima Community College. And so, not that I want to discourage anybody to go into any other field, but how many fields, if you get a 2-year certification, an ASE certification, can you make $90,000 as a master tech? And right now, there's a tremendous shortage in that. But the flip of it is, kids don't realize that if you want to be that master tech and make $90,000 a year, it's not like old school mechanics. You have to know math, you have to know science, you have to understand computers, diagnostics, electronics, so that fits right into a lot of math classes and a lot of science classes. So I think part of the challenge also is communicating the type of prereqs you need, even for a ASE cert that you're thinking isn't a 4-year degree, but the science and math involved are just as rigorous.
Okay, just to shake it out a little bit, we'll start with this, Mr. Baker. How do you see, and some of you also referenced this, how do you see ACT scores informing your students' post-secondary planning? How does the ACT fit into how they're planning for college?
So this is the first year that Flowing Wells High School participated in providing all students access to the ACT test through the Helios Foundation, and this worked. We had almost 100% participation, which was really exciting for our school. But very, very few kids did not actually participate. I hope that both of you, I see right here from Flowing Wells, participated. I got a thumbs up, and I'm good. So both Patrick and David participated. So this is the first time that we've had the opportunity to bring in a nationally kind of norm test into our educational environment on a large scale that we can actually kind of look at. Participation rate for our district on the ACT was very low. About 30 kids would take that, and maybe another 30 would take the SAT. So the first thing that we've been working on is what is a nationally norm kind of college sort of entrance, it's not necessarily an entrance test, I shouldn't say that, but sort of an assessment to kind of look at where you are prepared across the nation against sort of the sample. And that has been very informative for our students and our families to begin to have a conversation. It's also informative for our faculties as we go forward, although they have not seen a lot of it yet because of when the scores came in and kind of what we're doing. Our challenge is that we still have multiple measures affecting particularly the junior level class with the new AZ merit assessments, and we've got some mixed messaging that we feel like we're dealing with in there. But the way that we feel that the information is, we are going to be able to sit down with students and say, based upon this assessment, this is already beginning to open up some doors. And these are what the doors look like when it comes to college admissions and access. And then we can look at a subgroup of students and say, this is where we need to move forward. And we need to look at scope and sequences of courses that can help you move forward in order to reach that goal. And those conversations are going to have to be largely small. They're going to have to be smaller groups, through smaller clubs, through counseling departments and mathematics departments and English departments. But we see that as a lens by which we can put kind of a very concrete conversation together based around a sort of measure that we can talk about differently than we talk about something like graduation rate.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think since the No Child Left Behind Act was put in place, we've been chasing our tail in public education across the United States because everybody's been trying to come up with, these standards that are national standards, and then tests. Each state creates its own tests, but it's supposed to measure the same set of standards even though it's made by a different testing company, has a different set of questions, administered differently, and none of that's worked. So if you go back to the ACT, That was something I took back in the day in the 90s before cell phones and all that really cool stuff. So, I mean, you know, the ACT makes sense because it compares you as a student. It lets schools see where they are compared to other students in other schools across the United States. It just makes sense that instead of chasing our tail with these national standards and all of these tests that are very expensive for the state to fund and pay for, and the millions of dollars, and in large states in the billions of dollars. I know in Texas it was over $1 billion industry for state tests. Reinvest that money into K-12 education and focus on the ACT, and I agree with everything Dr. Baker said. Let's design our instruction, our scope and sequence, our coursework, the rigor in our math and language arts focused on what you're going to experience with the ACT, and if you can handle that, do well on the ACT, that opens pathways and doors to universities that will be hungry to take you. And it just makes sense that the solution has been there the entire time. We've just been too busy trying to find another one.
I agree with what Dr. Sanchez said. We've been doing the ACT test in Vail for, I think, 6 or 7 years, and it's really helped us drill down to prepare students for a test that's recognized by colleges all across the country. But I think in terms of what it does for students, some of the really cool things we've seen is, you know, if no one in your family has ever graduated from college, right, then it's hard to believe that you can really do it. And I had a great conversation with a young man who's serving us at a restaurant last night. He's a graduate of Vail, and one of our high schools, and he was explaining that he had gone to a summer program, a pre-college summer program. Nobody from his college or from his family has ever graduated from college, and to his absolute shock, he got a 4.0 on his summer coursework, and the light bulb went on, and he went, I can do this. I can do this. And I totally related to what he was saying, because I was first generation also. I remember my college orientation, and the speaker said, look at the two people next to you. Only one of you is going to graduate from college. And I looked at the two people next to me and I thought, I wonder which one of them is going to graduate. Because I knew it wasn't going to be me, because I just didn't see it. And we've seen kids who that light bulb or that possibility door opens up when they get their ACT scores back. They go, wow, I did pretty good. I can do this. And so we're really sold on the ACT, and we've been pushing it. We're going to continue to do it.
This was our opportunity, our first opportunity as well in our district to implement the ACT district-wide. Like Floyd and Wells, that Dr. Baker indicated, we had low participation rates prior to this past year where we had that opportunity to administer it to everyone. I think we love and find the idea of having this data from this type of assessment very exciting, and again, echoing the comments of others, use that to interpret the EZ merit data. That's still kind of new for our state. And this ACT data being something that's apples to apples, that we can compare across districts, across states, and help inform our students about the strengths and weaknesses, programmatically get that information to, again, another data point to help see what we can do better to provide better programs for our students and help them to be more successful. That information is exciting. It's another tool that now all of our students have access to when they're trying to plan for their college, their post-secondary career and experiences, their education, where now they have that ACT data when they're completing their ECAP, that for some of our students, they may not have had that available to them before to help them make some good career and educational choices.
As the moderator, I'm not supposed to do this, but if you look at the state of Colorado, we go back about 12 years. The state of Colorado implemented a plan to allow every student to take the ACT. So in that year, what they found was their overall state results did what? They went down, because you had all these kids who hadn't taken the ACT before. So their overall scores across the state went down. But what they found out the next year was, I think they had a 16 or 17% increase in college applications. Exactly what Mr. Baker was just saying. All of a sudden kids went, oh, wow, I guess I can do this. So there's a lot of data to support that. let's start with Angel and we'll go clockwise. How are you helping students meet the desired outcome of having all students be college and career ready?
Ooh, trying to attack that on many fronts, from taking advantage of opportunities like the Helios Foundation ability to provide the ACT to everyone, to pursuing opportunities to expand and enhance our career and technical education programs, to give, there's many paths and students have varied interests, so while we want to be sure that we're able to shore up and make opportunities like our AP and IB programs available for students for whom that's an interest, we also want to make sure for students who would prefer the college and career technical education path that we're expanding that program and trying to improve it as well. So, and providing more opportunities for our parents to do a better job starting even down at the middle level with making them aware of how important it is to begin planning early for their students' post-secondary lives, making information available to them, doing a better job of informing our faculty and working with them about the ECAP and those planning tools that are available to students, working with our school community to provide career fairs to make students aware of what the opportunities are, and our post-secondary partners as well to provide some college and career fairs for our students.
Same thing, high expectations, and then lots of career tech and academic options that hopefully a student can find that gets them fired up and moving in the right direction.
A couple of things, you know, one of the big pushes we had last year, and we saw some very positive results. We pushed a lot of our Tucson Unified School District students into AP coursework. And a lot of them were really impressive students, they just were taking the easier classes. And so we encouraged our counselors to have those conversations with our students, and in some cases, just put them in the AP class. And then we'll tell them later. But we pushed quite a few kids into AP classes to the point that our school district was one of 3 in the state of Arizona to be recognized by the College Board as part of the AP honor roll. And what the AP College Board honor roll entailed, there were school districts that put more AP classes in place, got more kids into those classes, and had more kids scoring 3s, 4s, and 5s. So that was a big push, and we continued that going into this year. Along with that push, we also put AVID at our middle schools, and we have it at our high schools to support those students who are taking AP classes for the first time. And then the last piece is, you know, we did this summer at all of our high schools AP boot camp. So kids that for the first time were going to take these AP courses, we had teachers come in and provide some assistance to be sure that the students' math skills, writing and reading skills were what they needed to be successful in those courses. And so those are some of the things we did with AP. Again, to echo some of the others, we are strengthening our career and technical education programs as well. I mean, those are amazing programs, and I love working with Alan on doing that work, and that way you cover both pathways.
Just a thought to add to the conversation. One of the things that we've been trying to also do, besides just removing barriers and increasing expectations, is we're trying to increase out-of-school experiences. And one of the things that we're finding is that in order to kind of get a broader perspective of opportunities for students, you have to kind of go out into the world. And so what does this mean? It means field trips, it means partnerships, and it means taking a group of kids to Europe and having an incredible faculty that's willing to do that. It means we have a partnership with the University of Arizona where we send 35 kids up on the top of Mount Lemmon for 4 days and 3 nights, and they get partnered with a researcher. And they actually conduct field-based research with a graduate student at the University of Arizona. And they come back off the mountain, and this year a kid came back and he was showing me the picture of a solar system he took through a telescope with his iPhone. And he said, I didn't even know it existed. Like I never thought of being in somewhere beside Earth, and let alone Tucson. What we find is when we take our kids to Mount Lemmon or Southern California or Washington, D.C., large numbers of our students have not had those experiences. And so I think that we are trying to look at it as a kind of a broad exposure to a whole lot of options for kids and try to get them to pursue their interests. If we can get them interested, I think we can do a lot.
That actually leads into the final question for the panel, and that is, how can the community support your students in being successful beyond high school? Start with HG, and we'll go counterclockwise this time.
I'm last again?
You're last.
Work hard.
I think the biggest piece for the community is, it sounds simple, but it's very challenging, and it's awareness. Awareness of, the challenges that are out there and the type of support that our students need. And so, in a very simple way, when the mayor had mentioned our Steps to Success program, where we knock on doors and ask students to come back to school. And a lot of the reason that we see kids drop out or disengage or not take the rigorous classes, they really don't have somebody in the ear telling them, hey, wake up, go to school. Or, you know what, you shouldn't take the grade level class, you should take the AP class. Or, you're really good with art, you should consider auto body and getting into doing that type of work. It's art that pays pays well. So I think awareness is a big piece. So what the community can do is, I'd love for every school to have professionals that are community volunteers that ask the principal or counselor, hey, who are those kids that really need an advocate? Who are those kids that need somebody to talk to them about life after high school? Who are those students that need somebody to be a positive voice? I know we talk about mentorship. It's not a large time commitment, but a lot of times kids need a positive champion besides their principal or their teacher or their counselor. And it makes sense when somebody from the outside comes in and says, I'm your champion and I believe in you, you can do it, and let's talk about what you're going to do after high school. And, I'm not speaking ill of the home environment. In a lot of cases, people are working hard to survive. In our district, I think the number this year is 8 out of 10 students live below the poverty line. And when you're busy just trying to pay the bills and feed everybody, sometimes the conversation about life after high school really doesn't happen. Not because people don't want it to happen, it just doesn't. And so I think for community, just get involved, get to know who those students are, ask for their names, advocate not for them, but with them for a better future.
It's real tempting to think about community support, to think of a program or 2 programs that will just fix things, but it's really, it's a whole web, and it's all the little efforts that everybody puts together that makes a difference. It's the mayor showing up for a thing like this on a Saturday morning, and it's the Rotary Club doing things for kids and the Optimist Club doing things for kids. I went to a conference in Dallas, Texas a few years ago, and I went to an inner city church on Sunday morning, and before they got very far into the service, they recognized all the kids who had made honor roll and had them go to the front of the church. And it's all those little things that combine together push kids forward in a community. And it's also, gotta say, it's how the community votes on primary elections, which I think the ballots went out. You vote for candidates and vote for issues that are going to make a difference with education. It's just absolutely critical, because you got to put your money, you got to put your votes where your mouth is in terms of education, or nothing changes.
Yes, I would agree. It really does take a village to raise a child, and the support of the community, their participation in things, whether it's our business leaders and industry helping support and advise as it relates to our CTE programs, or some of our businesses helping with our TSW programs, so our students have the work opportunities available to them, and those experiences is really critical. Our community colleges, as well as institutions like the U of A, partnering with our students. We do a lot of collaborative activities with our local community college to make things like the pharmacy camp with the U of A available to our students. It's those types of experiences that for our students, they hadn't had those opportunities. I think it gets to what Dr. Baker was saying. With our students being at the southern end of the state, we don't often get those experiences that may be a little more readily available to others. And so the community support and the Tucson community support, in addition to our Nogales community support, is really just critical to make those opportunities and experiences available for our children.
So I think, on a macro level, I think it is a community that realizes that all means all. And we have to provide opportunities for all kids. And we can't let specialization and kind of narrowing focus of a community become sort of this interest on certain things for education. And that we've got to reestablish through what Mr. Baker was talking about, a celebration in multiple forums and overlapping environments where kids are doing outstanding things, and they really are. And one of the conversations I'm having a lot right now is sort of these generational conversations where I think there's a lot of just misunderstanding. There's a lot of lack of understanding of what's happening. Kids are doing some of the most incredible things. Kids are working harder in my high school than I did in high school. They're producing things that I've never even thought of producing. And they're committed to a community far different through technology and their social structures and interactions. And we've got to recognize that. And we've got to, in my mind, get everybody back on it that says, look, we are paying forward to the future. Generations before us did it for us, definitely for me. And that's our kind of our community obligation. What is our greatest resource? Education through our children. And I just think we have to really kind of work hard at building that forum. All means all.
I'd like to thank my colleagues for participating in the panel. Are there any questions that anybody else would like to ask? Yes. You have to stand because we can't see you.
No, I couldn't see it. Good morning, and thank you guys for coming. Two things. One, when we give you a call for key to employment for the 21st century, make sure your schools are all going, yes, we want to be there. Because this is our 20th anniversary, and that's going to be February of 2017. My other question is from the very first question that you guys had on the panel. When families have not had a tradition of going to secondary education, and when you get the parents involved in it. So if they're working with your first student, do you find that it does get easier when they're working with their younger brothers and sisters, and that has really taken hold? And, has that been your experience that, once we get the first kid and start working with it, when they start working with their brothers and sisters, it becomes the norm?
From a very personal point of view, I'm the first child in my family to go to college, kind of like Mr. Baker mentioned. So I'm the first one to go to college, and it's a true story. I showed up at Angelo State University in West Texas, and I didn't know I needed to take the ACT test, and my counselor didn't tell me. My GPA was really good. I took all the classes I needed. They let me in, and so the college admissions office thought that it was a mistake that I didn't have my ACT and that somewhere I might have it in my back pocket. So as I'm trying to register, they say, you need to go to the admissions office. I show up and they say, where's your ACT? And I said, what's that? Is that like a toothpaste brand? And they said, no, you need to take this test. So they had one the following week. I didn't do any ACT prep or anything. I went in, I took the test, and by the grace of God, I did well enough that the university let me in. Going forward, my brother is 3 years younger than me. I promise you, by the time he got there, he had his ACT, he had all his paperwork in, and I helped my brother with that. Fast forward to, I have a 9-year-old little girl and a 6-year-old little boy. When they were both born, they were wearing Texas A&M onesies, and we've been investing in the Texas A&M fund ever since they were born. So they're going to go to college. Their whole college experience is going to be paid for, and we go out there once a year so that they can see their school. I know I'm going to catch some heck here at UVA, but I mean, it does get easier because the older sibling that goes to college, a lot of times they get on the parents' case. about what needs to come next. And that's not just my experience. My wife has almost the exact same story, except her high school counselor was better than mine, and she took the ACT.
I'd just like to pick up on something that Cal said, which is, back when, as I said earlier, those of us of a certain age were in college, the look to your left, look to your right story, instead of out there is one of these myths. So I thought I would update that with today's facts, at least for the U of A. So no longer is it 1/3 of people make it through and 2/3 do not. That might have been the case decades ago, but that is not true. And this is not to diss Cal. I think this myth persists out there. But one of the great success stories in American higher ed is that universities everywhere, including the U of A, and actually community colleges too, are all about success. You could ask almost anyone here on this campus, and the entire system is about making sure that when you get into the U of A, that we are launched at making sure that you get out the other side successfully, just like the discussions we've heard. So the statistics right now are that the ones you might hear are for what we call first-time full-time freshmen, the FDFTS. Right? If you start at the U of A and you go all the way through and you graduate from the U of A, which by the way is not a huge percentage. People move and change and transfer all the time. But of those, the number is about 2/3, okay? But that's not the story. The story is people transfer, whether they go to ASU or we have students from out of state who come here and then they go back home to finish the degree, which is very common these days. That number, right, by the time you look at everybody and you see who actually graduates from a university or college by the time they're done, that number is well north of 80%. Just so that you understand. For those of you know what iPads are, this is the curse of standard statistics. iPads is about first-time, full-time freshmen only, and you get that 60% number. But actually, if we look at some of the real stats out there, this is the VSA and the SAM for those of you who know the logos, the acronyms. The real number is really up north of 80%. So there's a true success story about going to college. And I want the students here today to know that if you go to college, you will most likely, 80% plus chance, just all else being equal, graduate from an institution, no matter how. So you should know that and you should tell your friends.
The commission also has the second question for the superintendents and also for JTED superintendent, and that is about state funding of education that's coming down the pike, because we will be discussing that in one of our breakouts today. And we are past 1, 2, 3, and as the mayor said, we're moving into 4, 5, 6, and we'd like to hear some observations from you as to how you see this progressing.
Who wants to start?
So 1, 2, 3 was interesting because it was a imperfect solution, and I've caught a lot of heck for it because I remember when the stimulus money came forward. How many of you remember the stimulus money when it came from the federal government? I remember a lot of school districts used that stimulus money to hire a lot of full-time people, and some of them put it into salaries. Well, guess what? That stimulus money didn't reappear after it expired, and a lot of people got laid off, and a lot of people's salaries got frozen, and a lot of positions were eliminated. And so when you look at the Prop 123 funding, there are so many nasty little triggers and tag-ons and fine print to it, it scares the heck out of me. So I'm very cautious in how much we commit with Prop 123 money. I mean, it's great that we have it while we have it, but there's so much fine print to it that in 2 years it could be gone. I was visiting with Senator Farley, and he said it's going to be good for 2 years and then get ready. And this is a gentleman who, he has the experience to be able to say, I can tell you based on what's happened in the past. And if you go back to the 60s, Arizona's always been in some kind of a lawsuit for financial shortcomings when it comes to public education. So my big statement is on any funding that comes forward, it can't have fine print, and it can't have all of these triggers that could stop the flow of the funding. I mean, a lot of people say, ask, well, what are the triggers? And so you're trying to explain gross state product, and you have to equate it to gross domestic product, and then you have to talk about inflation, and by that point their eyes gloss over and they say, so is the money going to be here next year or not? And the smart answer is, I don't know, I hope so. And I'm going to light some candles at church and pray that it does. So I just caution everybody that as we take a look at 4, 5, 6, it can't come with strings, and it can't come with fine print, and it can't be something that the legislature says, oh, well, those triggers happen because gross state product and inflation, and we didn't have the level of growth in the economy, and the jobless rate went up, and so now all of a sudden we're going to freeze this funding. Good luck, it was fun while it lasted. So that's the piece going forward. It can't have those strings attached, and if you commit all that money and you obligate yourself to ongoing expenses with a funding source that have strings attached, you're going to be breaking hearts. You're going to be laying people off. You're going to be closing schools. You're going to be cutting bus routes. You're going to be cutting activities and programs, and it's just not wise. So that's my take on it. Whatever 4, 5, 6 is, it can't have the same strings that 1, 2, 3 did.
I'm just going to jump in for a second, because specific to the JTED funding, Joint Technical Education Districts, first of all, thank you to everybody in the world who contacted legislators last year to help get the funding cut off, if you will. The threat was that they were going to take $30 million. It took us 11 months to get that mostly resolved. They still took $1 million away from us, which was very unfortunate, because the million they did take away from us was the students that we were serving who were post-grads, kids who had graduated or kids who had GEDs, and then at the age of 19 said, oh, wow, I think I'd like to do the nursing program or the EMT program, and we're no longer able to service those kids. They still took that money away. In addition to that, by giving us back, if you will, the $29 million that they did, they gave us 47 pages of new legislation and new regulations that we have to follow. And I'm going to be real honest, I thought this at the time, I thought this is their way of still getting their funding back, because they're going to defund a number of programs that we do and say they don't qualify for JTED funding. And I thought that back in February when I first saw Senate Bill 1525. And I've had, in the past 2 weeks, I've had that confirmed by legislative counsel, people who work directly for Andy Biggs and for David Gowan. They wrote it very intentionally. Their intent is to come up with a number of JTED classes that they say, these do not qualify for JTED funding. They have actually, if you look forward in what they did, they have scored a $10 million increase or reduction in JTED funding for each of the next 3 years. And that is because they are going to identify JTED classes that don't qualify for funding. So we had a win, which was not really a win, and that is future funding. So everybody who supported us last year, and this was an enormous groundswell of business people, chambers of commerce, etc. Everybody helped get the funding cut stopped. But we have to get all of these people back in line with us, supporting us, so that they don't take that JTED funding away. And that's in addition to 4, 5, 6. And by the way, when we got the predictions back last year, the predictions for 1, 2, 3 from the JLBC, Joint Legislative Budget Council, they were grossly overstated about what 1, 2, 3 would mean to most of the districts.
We talk about school funding, but it's really important to break it down. There's really 2 issues. So if you think about it in terms of a teenager or high school student, how many of you would like more money? Right? Yeah, okay, all right. That's how the education system feels. We would like to have more money. So there's 2 issues. Where do we get the money? Right? Where does it come from? Because there's great difficulty in getting it from the general fund, and some of us have elections. We try to get money through elections. There's lots of talk about, well, if we just took money from this source or this source and put it towards education. So in terms of your life, it might be, if only my parents just up the allowance a little bit, or maybe I could go get a part-time job. I mean, those are two ways to get more money. We have the same struggle. How do we get more money in? And then the other issue is, well, once you got the money, what are you going to do with it? And so the state of Arizona is really struggles with how do you get more money, and then what are you going to do to it? Because there's money that goes out through JTED, there's money that goes to charter schools, there's money that goes to DSEG, there's money that goes to different kinds of school districts. So it's two very, very complicated questions. And then to make it even worse, they get connected, just as Dr. Storm was saying. It's like your parents saying, all right, we'll up your allowance, but when we up your allowance, we want you to put 30% of it in a fund for college. We want you to, to buy your own clothes. We're not going to buy your clothes anymore. And it just gets to be really, really messy. So as we look forward, if we just talk about all the details all the time, it's going to be really hard for us to come to an agreement. I believe very strongly that our conversation needs to start with, what do we want to do? Okay? What's important to us? What do we value? And we need to come together as a state on what it is that's most important and what we really value. Then we need to start figuring out where the money's going to come from and how we're going to get it distributed to make that happen. But right now, Arizona is really, really churning, and all that churning keeps us at the bottom and keeps us underfunded, and it keeps starving programs.
Can I add as well that yes, all of these things are critical, because when they aren't in place and we have these real uncertainties about if we're actually going to get that money on the schedule that is promised, or what extra things and hoops I'm going to jump through to be able to obtain that money, it's too difficult. And what we end up going back and doing then is asking our taxpayers in our community that's particularly difficult to help do a job that really someone else should be doing. And that's the issue, I think, where we're at as well for our community. Just making sure that those funding streams from the state are shored up and assured, and not more work, because we have enough, I assure you, so that we're able to do the things that we need to do for our students and our staff without burdening the taxpayers more.
I couldn't agree more with what Mr. Baker shared about articulating kind of the goals. One of the most painful things that happened in the Flemington School District is the year we lost career ladder funding, which was funding that was specific for teachers, and it had a whole culture around it about how we raised expectations for student performance, how we did projects for students, clubs and activities. And we're still feeling the effects of the loss of that funding. The legislature removed it to us, and they had a choice. They could either expand it out to every district or remove it. They chose to remove it. And the loss and the inability for us to replicate those funds have affected our entire culture in a very kind of significant way. And so what I worry about is consistency in funding. That if we have dollars, we have to understand that they're going to be protected and supported. And so I look at something like Prop 301, and those dollars are beginning to get on our radar. It's expiring in 2020. This is a very important issue to us, and we have to understand how do we plan and manage with funding. Just like Dr. Sanchez was saying with Prop 123, when you put triggers and timelines and things that can move on us, it's very hard. We have a new law coming into place called current year funding, and it's very scary for a lot of our districts to manage a budget in which you enter into agreements a year out and you will not know your funding for 18 months after that has actually begun because of the way we reconcile district budgets. And so current year funding is a very significant concern. And how do we kind of establish our district budgets and funding priorities? We also have to match funding to expectations. And what I mean by this is if we're going to have expectations for certain levels of performance, we need to match funding sources that are dedicated and safe and secure, and we can plan and build programs and build cultures around it. So in the areas of special education, there's a significant gap between the expectations that we're trying to provide for students that need special education services and the funding available for it It's really easy to see the gap is apparent, it's across the board, it's not hard to recognize, but we have not had a good conversation of matching those fundings to expectations. And then we have a whole separate issue out there called capital funding. And if we do not begin to reinvest in the infrastructure of our schools, and I'm talking about building renewals and roofs and air conditioners, if we don't, instructional aids and computers, and right now that's sort of separate, and it is truly an 85% cut that has been sustained now for a number of years. This is not 1 or 2 years, this is approaching 6 years. That we as we kind of work with our communities, we are turning to our communities more and more to ask for additional dollars through budget overrides and bonds to try to fill these gaps that are becoming very apparent. So I look at, we need consistency, we need to be able to plan, we need to think in terms of how districts can manage them. We've got to match these to our expectations. And so there's a lot that I just shared, and I probably didn't mean to get into the details like that. I actually like Mr. Baker's analogy much better with allowance. I understood that one. I didn't understand. So thank you for your time.
One final comment, and that is, we are often anything but number one. And based on what Dave was just saying, we are number one in the fact that since in the past 7 years, we have cut $28 million from our budgets in education in the state of Arizona. Higher cut than any other state in the country. Yay. Okay, one more.
Hi, my name is Felicia. I'm actually the financial assistant for the Metropolitan Education Commission, as well as I'm now the new appointed representative for Vail. So I'll be working with the counselors out there as well. I also have 3 children in the Vail School District. But first and foremost, I'm a parent, and so my question is, how are you guys bridging the gaps between the ACT and SAT testing as well as AZ merit? So with my experience, we have students that aren't doing very well on the AZ merit, which does not give them the confidence to go in taking an ACT and SAT class or testing. So how can we work with those students that are not doing as well as AZ merit and still pushing them toward higher education?
What was the last question you said? How can we what?
How can we help have those students have the confidence to go and pursue taking those ACT testing when they're not doing as well as what the standards come through from the AZ merit?
Actually, just yesterday, if you look on our district Facebook page, you can see I put a post up. We had all of our principals and instructional leaders from every school in the district. We spent the entire day tearing down AZ merit data and ACT data because we recognize the fact that we're actually asking teachers and students to shoot at 2 different targets, and it's a little bit confusing. But there are certainly many things that overlap, and I was in the room most of the day yesterday. Our staff was working really hard at that, and I think we are, as we get more and more experience with AZ merit, we had Ames test drilled down really tight. AZ merit has been a whole new game, so it's sort of like learning a new sports game, and you got to go, oh, wait a minute, I got to get this skill down better, I got to get that skill down better. In order to be successful. We do the same thing with the ACT test. We break it down just like you would break down the results after a football game and say, all right, what happened? How come we didn't get enough yards? How come this didn't happen? And we're defining our curriculum, defining our instruction so that we can do a good job of hitting both of those targets. And it is a challenge. Your question is a very, very good question, because it is 2 different targets, but we're well on our way to having students prepared to do well on both of them.
Bob, do you have one?
No, I defer to the time. I think
Okay.
we have the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so